Well, let's now bring you updates on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russian media has been rolling more videos of the Black Sea Fleet commander Viktor Sokolov days after Ukraine claimed that he had been killed in a missile strike on Russian Navy headquarters in Crimea. In one of those videos, Sokolov said the Black Sea Fleet is performing successfully. It's still not clear whether the video was filmed after Ukraine's missile strike on September the 22nd. But Sokolov was also seen congratulating members of the Black Sea Fleet soccer team for their performance in a soccer tournament for teams from Russian armed forces, which ended on September the 18th. One television reporter pointed out to Sokolov that the awards event in the Sevastopol region had been postponed because of known events in the port city, which of course is a possible reference to Ukraine's missile strike. And in another report from Russia, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said the tactical missile production has increased several-fold. He was seen making the remark in a video released on state television. Mr. Shoigu was seen visiting missile production factory in Moscow region. Russia has performed numerous missile strikes on targets in Ukraine since it began its special military operation there. But several Russian officials have said that Russia has involved in increased volumes of its missile and overall military production, but has not disclosed the exact members. And on the Ukrainian side, where President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed British Defense Secretary Grant Shapps in the capital, Kyiv. He also discussed how to bolster the country's defenses. Both men met on Wednesday evening and discussing briefing on air defense in Ukraine amid fears that Russia will use long-range missiles and drones to target critical energy infrastructure in the depths of winter. But this year, Britain has supplied Ukraine with Storm Shadow cruise missiles that have allowed it to conduct long-range strikes on targets in Russian-occupied territory.
We are very thankful for your support, from military to financial, humanitarian, and thank you that we feel that we can count on you.
We stand shoulder to shoulder with you. We feel your pain at what's happened, and we want to see a resolution, which is the resolution that you want and require.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has made an unannounced visit to Kyiv, meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. He says Ukrainian forces were gradually gaining ground in their counter-offensive against Russian forces. He announced that NATO now has overarching framework contracts in place with armed companies worth 2.4 billion euros for key ammunition, including 1 billion euros in firm orders. He condemned Russian strikes near Ukraine's border with NATO member Romania, saying that there is no evidence that such strikes were a deliberate attack on Romania, but reckless and destabilizing.
Today, your forces are moving forward. They face fierce fighting, but they are gradually gaining ground. Every meter that Ukrainian forces regains is a meter that Russia loses. And there is a stark contrast. Ukrainians are fighting for their families, their future, their freedom. Moscow is fighting for imperial delusions. Today, I can confirm that NATO now has framework contracts in place for 2.4 billion euros worth of key ammunition, including 1 billion euros of firm orders. This covers capabilities like 155mm artillery, anti-tank guided missiles, and main battle tank ammunition. This will help allies to refill their stocks while continuing to support Ukraine.
Well, Canada, on the other hand, has been apologizing over the praise handed to a Nazi veteran during a session attended by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's apology was more fixated on the predicament it put the Ukrainian president in, Russia has said the recent incident backs up its assertion that the war in Ukraine aims to destabilize the country, a charge Kyiv has rejected. A speaker, Anthony Rota, who apologized and resigned yesterday, a few days after he had publicly acknowledged the veteran in the House, calling him a hero.
In a few moments, I will address the House in front of all Canadians, in front of Jewish people here and around the world, and Ukrainians, to offer Parliament's unreserved apologies for what happened on Friday. The Speaker was solely responsible for the invitation and recognition of this man and has wholly accepted that responsibility and stepped down. This was a mistake that has deeply embarrassed Parliament and Canada. All of us who were in this House on Friday regret deeply having stood and clapped, even though we did so unaware of the context. It was a horrendous violation of the memory of the millions of people who died in the Holocaust, and it was deeply, deeply painful for Jewish people. It also hurt Polish people, Roma people, 2S LGBTQI+ people, disabled people, racialized people, and the many millions who were targeted by the Nazi genocide. Every year, there are fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors to share firsthand the horrors of what they experienced, and it is therefore incumbent upon us all to ensure that no one ever forgets what happened.
In the meantime, Central European foreign ministers have met in Vienna to discuss migration controls and the Western Balkans accession into the European Union. Austrian Foreign Minister Alexandra called on a review of the Schengen system, while Hungary's Peter also said that Budapest would reject any migratory pressure on Europe. Well, Stoltenberg and Slovenia's Tanja Fajon also reiterated calls for Western Balkan region and the integration into the European Union, saying that the region needed a clear perspective for EU membership. The foreign ministers of Austria, Slovenia, Hungary, the Czech Republic and Slovakia have been meeting in the so-called Central Five, a format since 2022 initially established to cooperate on matters related to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And we have suddenly a situation where two further Schengen countries have announced further border controls. That means by now a fourth of all Schengen members have border controls, encompassing 55% of all population among the Schengen countries. That shows that this system is not quite working as it should. And our position in Austria is we would like to have it to come back to the situation it was before.
Well, when it comes to the migration, we are faced with this challenge from the south. So we have to deal with that. That's our problem. When it comes to migratory pressure from the east, if there's any orchestrated action to put migratory pressure on Europe from any direction, we heavily reject that. We heavily reject that, and we are heavily against. So this position of ours is known, I think, very widely by the Russians as well, and this position has not changed. And if there's a will, I can express this position anytime.
Everybody knows that we have a very common approach to the Western Balkans. We want to see them as quickly as possible in the European Union. We believe that the European integration is not complete without them. Any problem arising there is a problem for us too.
It's extremely important, and countries in the region, to have a clear perspective that it is doable. It is doable if we have a political willingness. With all the hurdles on the side of the EU, with necessary reforms and adaptations, but also to push on the countries of the Balkans to do the necessary reforms and use the momentum, because I am afraid that with all the instabilities, we can risk another tension or a conflict in our region.
The VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now from Kyiv. Hello, Anna. It's great to see you again.
Good evening.
All right, so let's begin with how Ukraine has been responding to these emerging videos of the Russian fleet commander going places and doing things. It's plastered all over Russian media after Ukraine claimed to have killed him in a drone strike. So what's going on?
Well, yes, actually, Ukrainian military announced that, confirmed basically that he was killed during the attack in Sevastopol. And now, as the latest, what we've heard from the Ukrainian officials, that they will check this information, double check this information again. After these videos appeared publicly from Russian media. However, Ukrainian military officials mentioned that at this point of time, they cannot confirm that these videos were made after the attack. So basically these videos do not have particular time and date that could be understood from the video, and also during the speech by the general, it was not it was not clear when this is happening. So Ukrainian military did not yet came with any additional information, but at this point, what we know is that they are double checking this, and we are waiting for further confirmations.
But, I mean, the English Defense Secretary is in Kyiv, as is NATO Secretary General, also, that's Jens Stoltenberg. It is still clear the optics are on Ukraine's side, but when it comes to show of support by allies, but just 2 weeks ago, I mean, the North Korean leader was in Russia. How reassuring is it for Ukraine that these visits will continue?
Well, definitely we can see that top officials, especially military officials of different countries which are partners for Ukraine and great allies for Ukraine, are coming to visit, coming to discuss. President Zelensky meeting with them on different European stages and international stages as well. Of course, this is a very important for Ukraine that this continues, a very important sign that support is strong. And we can hear these words of support coming from people who represent the allies. What's important also to mention that also we can see that new equipment is coming, and definitely this creates additional positive vibes here in Ukraine, especially after such meetings. In terms of North Korean leader meeting Russian leader, to be honest, here in Ukraine, this was perceived as kind of, a situation that North Korea, that basically Russia has to ask North Korea for help. And Ukrainians really perceived it as a weakness of Russia. But again, it's very dangerous to underestimate Russia and its allies. So Ukraine has this trying to be on the safe side and not to perceive it as nothing has happened. So it's important, but again, it also demonstrates that Russian support is not as great as Ukraine has.
You also said, I mean, it's not, we cannot underestimate the Russian side, which means, or brings me to the next question, which is Ukraine actually getting the military support it is asking for to be able to defend itself?
Well, if we, when we see the confirmations of ATACMS finally, even ATACMS coming, and tanks and jets, fighter jets, it definitely something that Ukraine could have not, expect and, got if we talk about this a year ago. But at the same time, Ukrainian military officials and President Zelensky always repeat that Ukraine definitely needs more. But it doesn't mean that it's not enough or it's not a great result, but because well, we can understand Ukrainian position. Ukraine loses lives every day, and Ukrainian servicemen die every day in a great amount, unfortunately. So, and this is the main reason why Ukraine asks for more and more. But definitely we can say that getting jets, getting tanks, getting long-range missiles is something that according again to new Ukrainian Minister of Defense, will make a difference, and it's expected that this difference will be seen soon at the battlefield. So, and at least Minister of Defense, Mr. Umerov, mentioned that a lot of this equipment is already, at least the tanks, for instance, are already at the battlefield. So, well, I guess we cannot say that it's not positive or Ukraine is not happy. Definitely Ukraine is happy with what it's getting, but considering the consequences of this war and considering the situation at the battlefield, of course, Ukraine will ask for more.
But let's come to the 98-year-old Ukrainian Nazi veteran, that's Yaroslav Honka. How does Ukraine feel about him?
You know, to be honest, this topic was not that discussed in Ukraine. So yes, it was not. Ukrainians were not happy with that. Definitely, it was not really a positive. It was not really one of the positive moments of President Zelensky's meetings in Canada. But I cannot say that Ukraine, created any tragedy out of that situation. Of course, it was not a very it was a very delicate and not very, positive situation. But I can just say that we did not hear any official comments, pretty much, and I cannot see Ukrainians discussing this situation further. I guess the most important here that Canada took an action, and Prime Minister of Canada made this, public speech asking for, apologizing for this situation. But in Ukraine, it was not that much discussed.
But Anna, I mean, the Canadian speaker just last week extolled him in Parliament. But now that action is already receiving some backlash and he has resigned. But this was done while Ukrainian president was in Parliament. Ukraine itself has even denied it is Nazified. How has the president absolved himself from this incident?
Well, as I mentioned, we did not hear pretty much any official reaction on that. I guess here in Ukraine, inside the country, this did not create, that huge news due to the fact that the war is ongoing and there are more important things to discuss and more crucial things to discuss. I can see that at least at this point, President Zelensky did not get into that case, into that situation too much, well, we will see if any official statement from him will come. But at this point, well, it was just certain things not happy things that happened. But as I said, not a big tragedy was created here out of that.
All right, thank you very much. VOA's Anna Trenikova for your contribution and your update always on the world today. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Ukraine's military has said the fighters who had previously fought in Ukraine for the Russian mercenary group Wagner have returned to the battlefield in the east. The mercenaries had withdrawn from the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut in the month of May as they handed control of the area to the Russian military. Just on Wednesday this week, the Deputy Commander of Communications for Ukrainian troops in the east, Serhiy Cheredvaty, said the former Wagner fighters who had returned to Ukraine were now working for the Russian Ministry of Defense or its affiliated structures and had joined as individuals, not as a unit. Ukrainian soldiers taking part in the offensive near the Belgorod city of Bakhmut also say the former Wagner troops had returned to the area. Well, Moscow and Havana are in contact after Cuba made arrests over the alleged trafficking of its citizens to fight for Russian forces in Ukraine. And that's according to the Russian ambassador. Earlier this month, Cuba announced the arrests of 17 people linked to the trafficking network that operates from Russia to recruit Cubans for military operations in Ukraine. Ambassador Victor Coronelli told journalists he does not know how many Cubans are involved. Among those arrested are alleged recruiters and 14 Cubans accused of planning to go and fight for Russia in Ukraine.